Calling to order the Thursday, January 23rd, 2020 special meeting of the 38th Council of the City of Berkeley. Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Blanchard.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dean.
Here.
Councilmember Gavin.
Here.
Councilmember Hennon.
Here.
Councilmember Price.
Here.
Mayor Turbrack.
Here. First order of business this evening is the approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Support.
Motion moved by Councilmember Baker with support from Councilmember Gavin. Are there any changes or corrections? Seeing none, Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll?
Blanchard.
Yes.
Dean.
Yes.
Gavin.
Yes.
Hennon.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. Our agenda has been approved. At this time, would you please stand and face the flag, or we'll face the flag for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have reached the citizens' comment portion of our evening, when you may present your thoughts on issues that are not included on tonight's agenda. If your concern needs to be addressed by a member of city staff or department of the city, please sign your name on the sheet provided at the clerk's table. You may speak on a specific agenda item while it is being considered. When you come up to the microphone, please state your name and city of residence.
My name is Gail Bettaga. I am commenting about 5G. I am totally alarmed and frightened about this rollout. It has been proven by independent studies to cause cancer, alters DNA, reduces sperm count, and there's all kinds of other things that are connected. It has not been proven to be safe. The telecommunications industry has no proof that it is safe, and it's being rolled out as we speak. I'm asking that you take a pause and don't rush into this, because there are cities all over the state that are looking into this, and I've been told that there's new information coming out soon. I am not the expert, but I can connect you to experts such as Frank Clegg, the former president of Microsoft in Canada, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., hundreds of scientists and doctors from around the world that have appealed for a moratorium on this until they can prove that it's safe. I have personally been a victim of radiation from going to a doctor for acne. I do not want to be exposed to massive doses of irradiation. Our country has the highest acceptable level in the world. I do not want to be exposed to this. I've never been so frightened in my life. I have a packet here that I'm going to present to you that I hope will be given to all the council members and the mayor and the city manager that has lots of information in it. I hope you will read it, and I'm asking that you don't rush into this. You pause and wait until more information comes out. So I would like to, who should I give this
Can you leave it right with the clerk, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
My name is Anthony Bologna. I'm an attorney. Want to speak on the point system. I sent counsel.
Well, hold on. We're going to be talking about that when we get on the agenda. This is public comments for items that are not included.
Not included.
on
Okay, so
tonight's
individual
agenda.
at that time.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. And any additional public or citizens' comments for anything that's not included on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing nobody else coming up to the microphone, we will move on to our order of business. First up is our consent agenda. Ms. Mitchell, would you please read the items on tonight's consent agenda?
1, approval of the minutes. Matter of approving the minutes of the 38th City Council meeting on Monday, January 6, 2020. 2, ordinance number 0120. Matter of considering the second reading and adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Berkley, Michigan, to add new Article 3, Snow Emergencies, to Chapter 38, Civil Emergencies of the City of Berkley Code of Ordinances to establish snow emergency procedures and parking prohibition. 3, ordinance number 0220. Matter of considering the second reading and adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Berkley, Michigan, to add new Article 5, Small Cell Wireless Facilities, to Chapter 118, Telecommunications of the City of Berkley Code of Ordinances, to provide for the regulation of small cell wireless infrastructure and the activities of wireless infrastructure providers and wireless services providers regarding the placement and siting of wireless facilities, support structures, and utility pole attachments.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Dean with support from Council Member Hennan. Are there any corrections, additions, or further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll on tonight's consent agenda?
Dean,
Yes.
Gavin,
Yes.
Hennan,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. Our consent agenda has passed. We will now move on to our regular agenda. Ms. Mitchell, would you please read item number 1 on our regular agenda?
Resolution number R120, matter of approving a resolution of the Council of the City of Berkley, Michigan, approving the marijuana business license application evaluation point system to be utilized in evaluating marijuana business license applications.
Is there a motion to approve R0120?
So moved. Support.
Moved by Councilmember Gavin with support from Councilmember Blanchard. Okay. This is an item that we've talked about a number of times, and I know we have received significant feedback. There have been further changes to the point system based on our conversation last time and various input that council members have given Mr. Baumgarten throughout the last couple of weeks. This conversation is going to focus primarily on council input. Now, Mr. Bologna, I know you've already been up to the microphone. You were up there before I could make that point, so I will allow you to speak for a little bit on this. But at this point, council needs to make a decision in what we think is in the best interest of our community. We know the metric's not going to fit everybody, but everybody would like it to fit them. I completely understand that, but every time someone says, well, if you move this, you move this, you move this, we're not going to move it. So we need to make sure that we are being efficient and that we are doing what council feels is in the best interest for our community. Now, that being said, Mr. Baumgarten, you want to make some notes on some of the changes in what we're looking at today, and then I will allow some brief comments before council makes decision.
Absolutely, sir. At your place setting and mailed out just about an hour ago was an up-to-date collection of the feedback that we've received from council members thus far. It has been our practice to incorporate those immediately into the changes on the point system. Having a little bit more feedback now since Friday, since the packet's been made available and it's been shared with City Council, we wanted to make sure that we were also incorporating the feedback we've received since then. So what we have for you today is individually the feedback that we've gotten, both in the addressing definition section as well as the criterion point values, and they're called out individually with alternative language, both italicized and bold and underlined. And then also how that would look if incorporated into 2 alternative sections of that point value in full. So you've got an alternative option A and alternative option B. And both of those changes are highlighted in red, as our practice with the ordinance text as well. So this includes updates to definitions for managing stakeholder, and under the pass-fail alternatives, mentioning specifically that disclosed stakeholders need to be clear of a recorded detrimental acts to public. This is in relation to the threshold for disclosing the individuals. With changes recommended for the item that's associated with 23 points, the items associated with 17 points, and the items associated with 16 points, and 10 points. So in total, that has been a good portion of the feedback that we have received from the city council members. And there are also some recommendations for completely new additions to this point system as well in the next portion. So that sort of outlines the items we have here today.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, council is, I know looking at some of these for the first time or within the last hour. I will allow Mr. Bologna, you would like to approach here. You are up.
Thank you,
because,
Mayor.
as I mentioned, you got in before I told nobody else they could talk.
I apologize and thank you, and I'll keep it brief, and thanks for allowing me to speak. I sent council and the mayor an email. I hope everyone received it with a letter attached to it. As stated in that, first and foremost, the people, my clients, they appreciate the time that the council and the mayor has put into this. A lot of cities have rushed this process, and when they rush things, things can go wrong. So the fact that you're taking the time to do this right is greatly appreciated. The council has been very adamant throughout this process that they want to find a just and equitable solution to find the best possible applicants for the city of Berkeley. And that's the way it should be. And after reviewing the point system and taking things into consideration, some things that I'd just like to address with the council that they may want to consider before they finalize the point system and the resolution. One of the things that caught my attention and that is of some concern is the 23-point allocation. It's a general blanket on people who have been successful in business. The difference here, though, is marijuana business is exceptionally unique. So my suggestion in the letter to council was to take into consideration adding the word marijuana businesses. And with that, there's certain systems and criteria that the council can look at to properly evaluate, have they been successful operators of marijuana businesses? One of those things is the metric system, METRC. That's a nationwide system that's accepted within this industry, which tracks from pretty much seed to sale the process of selling marijuana and cannabis. If people follow this, it will be documented. So it's a pretty simple thing to say, has the applicant followed the system? Are they aware of the system? Do they know how it operates? It's going to be an easy way to vet out applicants that have no clue what they're doing in this industry and frankly shouldn't be operating within the city of Berkeley. Another thing that they can look at is, have applicants filed federal IRS tax returns related to medical marijuana businesses? Even though the federal government doesn't approve it, they still will accept federal tax returns. And one of the issues with the industry, unfortunately, is a lot of people will operate these businesses but fail to file the federal tax returns. That's another quick criteria that people can look at to see, are they qualified? Do they have experience? Are they an upstanding citizen? Do they pay their federal tax returns? Another criteria that they could look at, which we suggested, was have they been audited by the state of Michigan with their prior businesses? And have they passed those audits? And what do they look like? It's a simple yes, no, but it's another way to vet out who can properly operate these businesses within the city of Berkeley. Like I said, the concern is a lot of applicants will likely apply. The council will be inundated with numerous applicants, but this is a quick, easy checklist with industry standards of how you could truly vet who's a proper applicant. The other thing of concern was, and this will be the last point because I appreciate the time, was the 19-point factor as far as the green zone mapping for property owners. I have some clients that relied on what council represented as a green zone map, spent significant time and due diligence in getting property within certain areas. And based on the current point system, and it may just be an issue of clarification, but the way I read it, if they're in certain zones within the city, they're not going to receive those points. And they weren't aware of this until this point system came out. So they relied on the maps that were presented. They spent a lot of time picking out properties and selecting what they thought was the right property, but now they're being told that they're going to be penalized for picking certain properties with that map. So just something for the city to consider, it's kind of an after-the-fact penalty. And it's going to affect property owners, it's going to affect applicants, so just a consideration. So thank you for your time, and appreciate you guys reading the letter.
Thank you. Okay, what's going on here?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Aaron Geyer. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for approximately 32 years. And I share the sentiments of my colleague. I applaud the members of council who have put time and effort into this. But also, as my colleague stated, I share concerns that there are flaws in the point system. My colleague has pointed out a few.
All right, I'm probably going to stop you right there, Mr. Geyer. Again, I understand that you guys both represent clients who this might not fit as well as you would like, and I completely understand that. But council is the one who needs to make this decision. And if it's always, well, I think you need to change this, or you need to change this, realistically, at this point, that's not what we're here to do. We've heard a lot. We've gotten a ton of feedback. I'll allow you to finish a couple of points, but I don't want a parade of everybody's either business, and we've kind of made a habit of this in the past, not coming up and presenting special business plans or what helps individuals. We're looking macro, and council is the one who ultimately need to make this decision.
Then I will just simply focus on one point.
Okay, thank you.
And that happens to be your 10-point category. Because your 10-point category only requires 1 year of experience. And marijuana has now been within the purview of this government since 2008. So if you're on the table and you need a surgeon to operate, do you want a surgeon with 1 year experience, or do you want a surgeon out there who has 12 years of experience? Consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Council, I'm very interested, though, to hear your thoughts and opinions. We have a couple of alternatives. Again, as I mentioned the last time, personally, speaking for myself, what I'm incredibly focused on is the strength of the operator, having the best operators in the city, and alternative option B adds in a little bit of some additional points for the strength of that operator in some of the various categories. I am not necessarily opposed to adding more, but I don't know how much we can actually, Mr. Stern, have in there in terms of viable or verifiable criteria, either at the state level or a federal level, in terms of audits or whatever else. So the more points, and that's why you see that is at the top of 26 points, is the ability to successfully operate, has some of the things that we've talked about before at the top. That's incredibly important to me. The development in areas that need development, something that's important to me. It was moved down a few. I'm fine with that. I understand, because for me, focusing on the strength of the operator is incredibly important here, and having supply and being able to have state-verified cultivation so that we know that whatever is happening in our city from a supply standpoint is tested, approved, and verified by the state. A couple of other, I guess I'll just quickly go through some of my thoughts, because I do think that we're pretty close on this. We've had a lot of time, and like anybody else, or like I think was mentioned earlier, we focus in on a couple of things where we really want to see some changes, and then we get those fixed, and then the next one, we're like, oh, wait, that one also kind of has some issues there, and that's kind of what we're running into. I'm good with the 26 and 25, a couple of changes that have been made. I still am the 17.1, and I know this is something that came up last meeting. I don't think that we need to have the 6 months in there. 6 months or 10 years, I don't see that making as much of a difference. What I'm really focused on, again, is who are the operators, because very few folks that have reached out to me have said that they're applying on their own. It's always, I have a group, I have this, I have that. All right, that's cool. I want to make sure it's the right group, and I don't think it's always just about how long somebody may or may not have had the property. Certainly have to be a property owner. I'm not options or purchase agreements, none of that. is as important as you own the property. So that's one of the corrections I'd like to discuss today. And then really the last one is I'm just not sure about the 15 point. That brings, proposed development eliminates or brings into compliance existing or non-conforming use or structure. I know we want to have multiple points, and one of the other reasons why there's some more breakouts that I suggested in the top is to prevent the chance of many applicants getting the same amount of scores, or the same score. Trying to prevent as many potential ties as possible and making sure that we're really focused on what we want, and whatever applicants match that would be the applicants that receive the highest scores. And that 15 point, I'm not sure what that adds in terms of a operator specific or development. I mean, I understand brings into compliance existing non-conforming use or structure, but 15 points, and I'm not sure how many places that would really apply in the city. So those were the only three that I have questions or potential changes to. Again, I appreciate my colleagues' incredible amount of time and effort going over this, and conversations with Matt and with Dan Hill and with Aaron to try to get us to a place where we can have this conversation. Aaron Saluto, our Community Development Director. So thank you all, and I'm anxious to hear some more feedback from members of council. Councilmember Baker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just as a question of clarification on the points you just made, you're basically suggesting that you're focused on alternative B in your
Correct.
comments, okay? And your proposal is basically to add the 26-point item as listed. The 17-point item, your suggestion would be, I heard what you didn't like, but I didn't hear what you did like.
I like the rest of it.
So it would basically just say, at least one stakeholder is either a property owner in Berkeley or is a current majority owner or stakeholder of an existing Berkeley business, basically striking the clauses on the month. Okay,
Right,
just
so it
wanted to be
allows for
clear.
Folks who
Yeah.
own and for who rent and maybe have a space.
Sure, and then your third piece was basically to strike the 15.1 and move everybody else up a notch or
Correct.
something?
Correct.
All right. So of those, I'm sure there's a broader dialogue around the 26-point item. I'm not very concerned either about the 6 months, 10 years, that kind of thing, but I do like the idea of 15, maybe it moves down a little, but the notion of taking an existing structure and investing in it and bringing it into conformance and things is attractive to me, whether it's in the downtown, as I've advocated for, or in anywhere in the city. I like the option that this offers, and it might let somebody gain those points that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get up above, so,
Excellent. Thank you.
thank you.
Councilmember Hennan?
Right, and on the issue of non-conforming uses, I agree with that. I do see this as, part of the development tool to help, if they could spend a little bit more money but bring it in compliance with code, then it is a win for all of us. On the 17-point issue, the 6 months, I do like the 6-month limit. I do want to incentivize people that already are established here, that aren't, we're going to have people that, and even if they're already established, they're going to have people helping them, but somebody that already has roots in the community, a reputation, 6 months isn't much of a reputation, but it is, better than nothing, and I feel they're going to want to be a more responsible stakeholder.
I agree with everything you said. The 6-month thing, again, that goes back to when this conversation started, and it's more of just somebody who hopped in and grabbed some property before things, they weren't really necessarily invested, but they saw that Berkeley was a pretty prime location, which is my only concern with that number, but thank you. Any other comments on anything else? We don't just have to comment on the things I said, but we can comment on everything.
I think we're going to need to have a longer discussion on 26.
Okay. All right, good. Any other comments at this point before we move on to other items? The
Yes,
metric?
when we're talking about what items we most want to discuss, I'm very interested in discussing what's currently number 13. Application has disclosed 100% of owners and stakeholders, including those with less than 10% stake. I understand that the state does not allow us to require all stakeholders to be disclosed. In our clarification of some of the language with our pass-fail, we clarified that we're only talking about all disclosed stakeholders or clear of recorded detrimental acts to the public good. And I think if that's something that we value, which we should, that making sure we have applicants who are willing to disclose all their stakeholders is incredibly important. So I want to continue to advocate for that receiving many more points than it currently does.
Okay, thank you. Jack, go ahead.
Okay. I agree that this alternative option B looks good. I'm with you. I don't know that we need 6 months in there, but I don't have any hard, strong feelings on that one way or the other. I like 26. I do not agree with my partner here on moving that 13 up, because we're going to get all the people who have 10% now. My concern is that we get somebody that discloses a whole bunch of people. We have no way of checking those people out. We have no way of verifying that who they are anyway. It's a process of doing a background check, and we don't have the ability to do a very detailed background check, at least not very fast, so that we can't do it in a reasonable time to turn it around. So I think as long as we have those that have 10%, I think that is sufficient, and we comply with state guidelines.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to?
That's good.
So let's spend a couple minutes in talking about 26. This is in red because it was a big change. Now, the two bottom ones came from what used to be subscore 10, was just included into this category. So there was 10 and 16 points were added to. Again, the point of this, and whether this is what we ultimately end up with, is to ensure that we have the best operators here. And it's very important, which is why it is where it falls on the point system. Thoughts on what we have there for 26 points, or comments on this?
Just for the sake of
Sure.
clarity, do you want to just kind of quickly highlight what those 3 subpoints are for folks
So,
that may not have
as
seen
a-
it yet?
That's a great point. As I said before, well, the first one is supply chain with state-verified cultivation facility, certification that adequate supply will be readily available for sales upon the anticipated opening date of the business. Requires cultivation to submit affidavit affirming supply levels. That's 16 points. 5 points, at least one managing stakeholder demonstrates at least 1 year of experience operating a licensed marijuana business in Michigan. And 5 points, at least one managing stakeholder demonstrates at least 1 year of experience operating a licensed marijuana business in other legal jurisdictions, also 5 points. So it breaks out a little bit more, creates a little more disparity in the applicants. Thoughts? If there are no thoughts, we'll move back on to the next one. Councilmember Hennan?
Well, part of my slowness to respond is just how late we got this.
Yes.
So so I want to make sure I take some time to digest it. I like the idea, because what good's giving them a license if they then have an empty storefront? But how do we verify this item? How do we, do we have the expertise other than them signing a piece of paper that says they can, but
Mr. Attorney?
Actually, the same question that I had when I saw this, and we've talked about it and may need to think it through more. There's a lot of speculation involved. First of all, when somebody's going to be open for business, when they're going to get through our local, not only licensing processes, but land use approvals, go through the state process. What's going to be available or not is going to have an awful lot to do with just basic supply and demand, and how soon and plentiful the Michigan product will be available, and if the Michigan product isn't available, what are the alternate sources? My hunch when I look at this is that probably every application you receive will include an affidavit saying we expect to fulfill this. And I'm sure that that will be said in all honesty and sincerity. But is it something that we can rely on? Is, you know, you can take that to the bank? I don't know. I think it's going to be more, the time of application, it's going to be more an indication of intention than it is a fact.
Well, there are folks who do meet that criteria. Not a large number, at least in my understanding and my research, looking around what's going on and talking with some of my neighbors. There is some question on where it's going to be coming from, and the being vertically integrated, but also the cultivation and making sure that it's state verified. And that was the whole point of this. It's like you said, anyone's going to say, yeah, of course we're going to do this. But if you already have that and show that you've already gone through the process to get to that point, to me, that's important.
No, I understand, Mayor. Don't get me wrong. I think having a fully thought-through business plan is something that this council's definitely going to want to know about. We are probably going to be less favorably disposed to people who just decide, boy, marijuana seems to be where the money is, and I'm thinking about getting into that business, and if I get a license, then I'll figure out where we go from there. Those aren't the kind of applicants we want. We want applicants that already thought this through. My comments were really to address the similar comments that Council Member Hennon made, is if we get this information, how reliable is it going to be? And my point is, I'm not sure it is very reliable, because there's so many things that can come into play that could affect what you think is true today. 6 months from now, may no longer be true. There could be supply and demand issues. Maybe there'll be oversupply, maybe there'll be undersupply. There's just a lot of variables.
Yeah. No,
But I fully agree. At the time of application, we want to do everything we can through this criteria to make sure that our applicants are serious folks who have given this a lot of thought and have a solid business plan and aren't just speculators.
Okay. I'm not going to, if this is able to, if council feels comfortable with the document, and we're going to make, we have obviously some more things to go through, we will, a motion will be made tonight. But if we are not comfortable, especially with the fact that some of us have only, you know, we've all seen this for over an hour, just over an hour. If it does not move today, it does not have to. I'm much more concerned that we do this correctly and thoughtfully and have everything the right way before we just move it through. But if we get to a point where we are comfortable, then I have no problem moving it tonight. I just want everyone to, I don't want people to feel like they have to try to rush through this, because we've had so many comments and thoughtful input into this process. While we're all, while you guys are pondering the 26th, there's a couple other things we can get some more clarity on. I mentioned the 6 month. We've had some disagreement and some agreement. So, is there an issue if we just take a quick straw poll on 6 months, in or out, and whatever the vote is, I'm good either way?
Could I just ask a question about this? I feel like at the last meeting we talked about, instead of saying 6 months, but possibly giving a date to that criteria. Am I imagining?
It was 4 months, and now it's 6 months.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
it's 6 months because we're looking at it by the time these things get out 2 months into the future.
I mean, knowing that, that after this first round of applications goes through, the first round of licenses have been granted, future licenses, somebody wants to sell their business, whatever, people will have to go back to the application process. Rather than putting 6 months, if the goal is being invested in Berkeley before marijuana was on the table, then I would think a date that shows that might be an option.
I agree, but I think it's going to be difficult to find that date, and because you're always going to have people that fall on either side. You could have some people who said, "Oh, I've been here for X amount of either a month or a year, and I don't get it, but these folks do," which is why I don't want to have. I don't want that to be what impacts ultimately somebody getting the points. I want it to be based on merit more so than that potential. It was my point. So,
Okay.
oh, you have something before that? Yeah?
Yeah, and I think in all likelihood, and one reason I like that this part is a resolution is we are going to learn from this experience and be able to adopt it before the next round of applications, whether that either be somebody falling out of the system and people reapplying for that spot, or us extending the number of spots.
Excellent. All right, so we'll take a quick straw poll. So this is a yes, you want 6 months to stay in? No, 6 months can come out. Jack?
No.
Natalie?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No.
Dennis?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
And I am a no, which is 4-3. Ms. Mitchell, please check my math. We had a situation at one point where I was, it was probably a year ago, but I do not want to go through that again, please. You good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so at least as of now, the 6 month has been taken out in a straw poll, so that gets us down to Councilmember Price's proposal into moving 13 up. Applicant again has disclosed 100% of owners and stakeholders, including those with less than 10%. I think, again, going around and kind of getting a feel for, and your.
Could I address
you-
Councilmember Blanchard's
Sure.
concern as well?
Sure.
So, Councilmember Blanchard, I understand that your concern with making this higher would make it more likely that we would have so many investors disclosing that would put a burden on our city to need to do background checks. I'm actually hoping that making this higher would discourage possible applicants who know that they would be unable to disclose all of their stakeholders and investors because perhaps they have recorded acts of detrimental, looking at the phrasing, recorded detrimental acts to the public good. I think that, we only have one tool at our disposal to discourage those kinds of applicants. And I think this is the tool, and we should use it to the fullest possible degree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you, just to clarify, you wanted that moved up to 19 points? Is that what you proposed?
Just like I said in the last two meetings, I think it should be one of the top two criteria myself. But if 19 points is a compromise that other council members would be willing to consider, I'm open to that as well.
So thank you. I certainly appreciate your point of view on this and your passion. We've spoken about it a few times. Personally, in terms of what are our top priorities in this, operator for me is number one. That's why my proposal has that. I do value the development, and I think the state set 10% for a reason. And I know that I come into this, not that, well, I think we're going to potentially have workarounds for a lot of these things. And I'm not so naive to think that that's not going to happen. And I feel like if we give that more points, potentially, whether we can prove it or not, I don't want that to be what somebody gets additional points for. I'd rather have it be the operator has all of these license and verifications, and we have it in that place. So I do think it's important, but I think it's okay, in my opinion, at least where it is. But that being said, yeah, if council wants to move it, we'll certainly move it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do really appreciate the notion of transparency, and I think you make a compelling case. If somebody had somebody on their team that they weren't super comfortable with, they probably should rethink who's on their team in the first place and not be afraid of having them go through it. And if it's an extra name or two, I'm sure we'd be able to handle that within a reasonable time frame. So looking at, for me, it's more like where in the list would I feel comfortable moving it up. And I still feel like the proximity to the residential property is important, and the property owner and the location and the jobs and things are very compelling to me. So although I'm with you in spirit, I may underbid you a little bit here and suggest that it move up and bump down like from number 15 on or something like that. At least giving you a little.
Any additional thoughts on that? Thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Baker. Councilmember Gavin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I actually agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Baker. I think that, I similarly have, some of the other ones that are a little bit above it. I find, a lot of great value in it. Certainly appreciate the notion of transparency like you're talking about. But I think that, for me, that would be a good compromise in just trying to bridge that gap a little bit and move it up at least a little bit, understanding how important it is. That if we got it up to 15, especially since we just had a discussion about number 15 itself, potentially even coming off, which I know is not where the will of the council sounds like it was, but at least the discussion of makes sense to potentially move it down a little bit and kind of switch the two.
Okay.
So I'd be okay with that. Thank you.
So there at least is a couple of council members who've supported moving 13 to 15.
And likewise, as Councilmember Price made some compelling arguments, and I was looking, well, where would I put this? 15 is exactly where
Okay.
I landed as well.
Okay. Any issues with it going to 15? Is that okay? Natalie?
No, based on principle and the reasons, I think this is a priority in terms of transparency, in terms of full disclosure of the people making the decisions about these businesses. I would like it to be at 19 at the lowest.
I appreciate that.
On the record.
And it is on the record.
Snow then, right?
And
I have a comment. Thank you, Your Honor. If you have a less than 10% stake, you are not a decision maker in that business. You're not involved in the day-to-day. You're not feet on the ground. So while I appreciate your thoughts and your efforts, I'm not comfortable moving it up to where you would like it to be. But I certainly could compromise in moving it up to 15. I think that, and maybe I'm naive to believe this, but people that are filling out applications to run their marijuana business in the city of Berkeley, I think they're people that are serious about business and they've done their homework and they want to be successful. And so to partner with someone, that would be undesirable or have a negative impact on their business would not be a smart business plan. So for those reasons, and I think there is a privacy issue. There may be people that are investing, they're just putting some money in. They're not making the decisions. They're not doing a day-to-day operation. They want an ROI. So, that being said, if you're an investor, I'm, happy to see you earn your return, and, that is less of a concern to me. So, and especially because the state has set this, 10% rule, so, and I don't always agree with everything the state says. I just want that out there. Just want that to be on the record. But in this case, I can see it. So I'm willing to compromise to a degree, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I thank you for your thoughts and the time that, you've put into it. So I appreciate that.
all right, so our next straw poll is going to be 15 or 19. Are we okay with that? And getting a sense so that we can try to get to some consensus and continue moving forward. We'll start with the other end this time. Councilmember Gavin, 19 or 15?
15 for me.
Okay. Councilmember Hennon?
15.
Mayor Pro Tem?
15.
Councilmember Baker?
15, please.
Councilmember Price?
19.
Councilmember Blanchard?
13. I'll go 15, so it doesn't go the record.
Okay, well,
I know I'm throwing your math, and I'm 13.
Okay, so 15 is the number. So we'll move that up to 15. The last question, at least for now, again, we don't need, is what to do with 15. So 15, I'm not crazy about, but my council members, some of my council member colleagues certainly are. It makes sense. Just bump that down one. Is that?
Sure.
Will? Yes, no, yes, good? Yes?
That's fine.
Yes, okay. And everything subsequently as well? So we've got 15 went down to 14, everything else slides down one?
Sure.
Okay. Additional conversation on our system as it stands right now, with the changes that have been made. The question now is, are you comfortable enough to vote, or would you like to have until the February 3rd meeting to ultimately make what will be the final decision? Won't be going any further, and I think we're very, very close. I just, in respect out of respect for not seeing everything up until a little bit before the meeting, I want to make sure everybody is comfortable before I call for a vote on this. Councilmember Hennan?
Oh, are we, the one we're looking at is in option B with the supply chain.
Correct. And the changes that we made, the other few changes.
If we remove the supply chain, okay, so I do not think the supply chain criteria is necessary. If we remove that, I'm ready to vote today. If we did not, I need more time to consider that.
Okay. Councilmember Gavin, I mean, again, would you like additional time, or are you comfortable?
I actually, I think Councilmember Hennan makes a good point. The two that, yeah, I guess I'm wondering if we wait, is there a way to incorporate in the point system the kind of the point of the supply chain verification? Is there a way to manipulate that somehow to be able to actually make it doable to verify?
All right, all right, hold on, how about this? Because, yes, I do think that's important. We have come to consensus on a number of the other items. So, we're freezing those as they are, not making any other changes as it stands right now. I was just looking in the audience in general.
Right.
And focus on if there is a way to, as you mentioned, verify that we can, the veracity of this information is true. And focus, the only outstanding requirement or outstanding metric would be the successful operation. How can we really find out if we're able to judge this? Is that okay if we, and we'll postpone, figure out that one, but everything else stays the same? Is that fair? Good? Everybody good with that? Councilmember Baker?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one clarifying question.
Sure.
Is if the intent is to, at least your intent, as we understand it, is to retain this as the top item, then, like to my colleague's question about just removing the supply chain, then the other two would be appropriately bumped up to equate to the same 26, that kind of thing. And so if we were to make other tweaks, like change the supply chain to be a lower score and elevate the other two to be a higher score to still equate to 26, are you curious about that kind of positioning, or are you looking to still, just so I understand, are you really looking to double down on the supply chain stuff?
It's not necessarily just supply chain. I have the same questions that my fellow colleagues
Sure.
have raised and our attorney has raised, but I do think there is a way that we can verify on the application, at the time of application, that you have these things. And I think that will be a big differentiator in terms of points, who gets those points and who doesn't, so that we don't end up with, a number of different ties.
Sure.
That's to differentiate based on what's incredibly important, the strength of the operator, and the merit of their operation and business. So I'm not saying it has to stay, supply chain will stay verified, it has to be in there. If there are other ways that we feel like we can, I don't know, maybe Laura has some additional metrics we can look at. I had some notes here, and whether it's Laura, whether we have MRTMA, MMFL, I mean, all the different things that we can look at to try to gauge a successful operator. That is what I want to be that top criteria. Is that fair?
Yes,
You have
I
any
agree with
questions?
that, yeah.
Councilmember Hennan?
Yeah, so two comments. One, if we do determine that the supply chain is just not practical, not something we can do, it was a total of 10 points,
Correct.
and suddenly jumping to 26, that's a big difference. I think we should discuss in that alternative where it might fall, or we'll have to have that discussion next time.
Correct.
That discussion will have to be held. I'll throw out the idea, I don't know how I feel about this, making the supply chain part a pass-fail. I don't know how I feel about that, because if it is something verifiable, my inclination is no, but I wanted to throw the idea out there.
Well, I think the questions and ideas are probably not too different than some of our colleagues, so I do think that in this case, let's figure that one out, get crystal clear on that last item. We've got a couple of weeks to do that, but the rest of it is ready to roll. And we are not going to be, yes, fair, a lot of heads nodding.
Yes.
Very efficient on February 3rd. We'll address that issue, and we'll be ready to move. Okay. With that, I need a motion then? So we have a motion on the table.
I move that we suspend this until February 3rd and bring it up at that meeting.
Postpone?
Postpone, excuse me.
Postpone
Support.
by Councilmember Blanchard with support from Councilmember Baker. Any additions, questions, corrections on that? No. Seeing none, Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll?
Gavin,
Yes.
Hennan,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. Okay. Now move on to the next item on our agenda. Ms. Mitchell, would you please read item number 2?
Motion number M620, matter of consideration of approving a restated and amended collaboration agreement providing for the reconfiguration of and development of off-street parking at 1010 through 1046 Eaton.
Is there a motion to approve M0620?
So moved?
Moved by
Support.
Councilmember Hennan with support from Mayor Pro Tem Dean. Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
sorry. As I suggested last time, this item and the very next one that hasn't been read yet are essentially tie-barred together. So my suggestion would be that you consider and discuss them at the same time rather than separately.
Yes, as we did last time, I know we can only call one on the table at a time, but they obviously are connected as we saw last time, so we will be discussing both of them at the same time and then making motions and voting on both of them when we get to that point. Yes, in agreement? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
As we discussed this item last time, we had a number of residents who had some very, very significant and valid concerns with the items that we were looking at, the consent judgment, the collaborative agreement, both of them. A couple of those points in particular regarding ensuring that our planning commission had authority and removing a concept plan were some of the comments that we heard and that were very, very significant. And those were things that we certainly looked at changing in the agreement, and they both have been changed. The planning commission does explicitly have control, and the concept plan has been removed and it is not part of the equation. That being said, we have, again, a negotiated agreement, a renegotiated agreement that is not going to be perfect for anybody. I don't think there's a perfect for any side here, or at least a realistic perfect for any side. It is incredibly important that council hears and will continue tonight to hear feedback from the residents, as we did last time, and were able to make some of the changes into the agreement. But this is not an all or nothing situation, as we discussed last time. It has been an ongoing situation in which we need to come to eventually some sort of resolution, because there is a pending case that's going to happen regardless. Not going to get into all of the specifics just as last time, because this is still pending litigation. But we do have a revised agreement that we are going to take a look at today, and ultimately we're either going to make a decision to yes or no at this meeting from council tonight. I have, in between, spoken to a number of concerned residents, met with some residents as well, received emails, which I'm sure my colleagues have as well, regarding how important this is to that area, to Eaton, to Oxford, but also to the whole area, and ultimately to the city of Berkley. As I mentioned before, and I'm not sure how this happened, but somehow the perception from some residents was that the city was not working at all in the residents' best interest. We don't, care about this business only. And I tried to make that clear last time, and in the city, I'll tell you, has not done this. We could have done a better job of making that clear. Look, our role is to represent the entire city of Berkeley and make decisions on the entire city of Berkeley's behalf. Rarely does the entire city agree with us on any decision, whether it's for or against. It's just not the reality. And we know that we're going to have a situation at some point today. But everything that we have done from a negotiation standpoint was to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood, whether you agree with me or don't. That's what we have tried to do. And come to a resolution that resolved a practical issue from the parking side. I know whether some folks say it's perceived, some folks say it's real. Again, we want to resolve a practical solution, resolve a practical problem, and not destroy or injure the integrity of the city. And I do think that it is possible to do those things. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit further. But we certainly have had what is in the best interests of the city, the forefront throughout these entire, at least my 7 years we've been talking about this issue. Well, I'll let you guys talk. You don't need to hear me talk anymore at this point. So, council, we'll let the residents speak first, and then we'll have a chance to discuss and decide ultimately yes or no on this. Who would like to come up, please?
John Courtney on Oxford. I've been proponent against Vincenta ever opening up the door since they opened it up, and I still have a lot of notes and everything. And my main issue was that the lack of parking space originally, and they still went, city council and zoning still went ahead with it, which is why we're at this point in time now. A lot of the residents, a lot of their patrons have parked in the residential neighborhood, which is R1. It's not commercial parking. The city council ultimately designated P1 parking from Woodward to Stamford, Oxford and Stamford to Eaton to Woodward. That was designated P1 parking space. Yet the patrons continue to park west of Stamford into the residential neighborhood. As they park in the residential neighborhood, I would go over here to West Road. So they would take up all of the residential parking space. So on Oxford, the houses on the north side would have 2 parking spaces, but the south side is a fire lane. So the houses on the south side need to park to the north side when they have family and gatherings. But they can't park there because Vincenta's taken up all their parking spaces. Now, all of those residents are entitled to 2 parking spaces, and they're all taken up by Vincenta. Now, why aren't any of these patrons parking over here on West Road? When they established their parking over on Eaton, it took over 2 years for them to finally complete and cement that parking structure. Took over 2 years. And my understanding is they never did comply. Vincenta was supposed to supply the city council as well as the zoning board maps and areas of parking for their patrons. And to my knowledge, that still has not occurred. You're walking around. This is the kind of stuff that they leave, trash and debris, in our roadway, in my neighborhood. I called the city DPW to come out and pick it up, and the street sweeper did a real nice job. They went down one side, went down the other, and they right smack dab in the middle of the road and didn't clean it up. Now, as I walk around, this is their brand new parking lot, what it looks like. And this is what you're gonna put over on Oxford when you demolish those houses and put in a parking lot. I don't want it. I don't want that trash. I don't want their patrons here. This is what they look like. This is a brand new parking lot that took 2 years to resolve. This is what's gonna happen when they put that on over on Oxford. Again. I don't want the parking lot there. Not only that, you're gonna require lighting. All of that lighting is gonna go over to the residential homes. And we're still gonna have issues. Vincenta should have never been permitted to open up their doors from the beginning. I said so back then, I say so now, and as far as I'm concerned, the council back then was mainly looking at revenue from the business. The alleyway was designated one way from Eaton to Oxford as one way with no right turn. And to come into the residential, it was designated left turn only to push their traffic and patrons out to Woodward. Somehow or another, I'm traveling down Oxford, not once, but a couple of times, cars have pulled out of the alleyway with a near miss for a head-on collision. Little did I know, somebody went and removed the one-way signs. They also removed the no right turn signs. They also removed the do not enter signs. They changed it to a two-way alleyway. So now they have removed the one-way signs, the no right turn signs. They do have a one sign for a no right turn that is posted on the south side of Oxford Street, and that's an illegal intersection. Those signs are supposed to be posted before the sidewalk in order to allow the driver, forewarn the driver before getting to the roadway, not after the fact. And I continue to see cars pulling out of the alleyway, pulling into residential, and parking. And I've yet to see citations issued. That's all I've had to say. I'd like to submit these to the council.
Please leave them with the clerk. Thank you.
Parking lot. On my understanding, the agreement is to have a parking lot with 2 additional houses built. None. Residential only. Some of those houses down there have restricted deeds. I feel sorry for those people that live down the street that are gonna have to look at a parking lot. That's not why they bought those houses. And this has been going on since 2012, when the council decided to open up their business. For the what? The revenue. I'm kind of curious as to what the amount of alcohol sales are, because they're also blowing down through the stop signs. They are at Stanford and Oxford. And again, not one citation ticket was issued for blowing through the stop sign or rolling through the stop sign, and that's a 3-pointer on a driving record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gabrielle Suida, Berkeley. You will probably all remember me by now. First I'd like to say it's just, in summary, it's frustrating that out of an entire universe of potential solutions to this parking lot, I feel like we are now pleading and begging at the margins for the least bad subpar solution that is available. The residents, any direct voice from the residents has been totally shut out of these conversations since 2014, so we've had to rely on the city to represent us, and the city employees, city council. That's frustrating. I feel like there was a lot of potential early on for better solutions, and without restating all my points from last time, we have evidence that Vincetta has repeatedly acted in bad faith in a my way or the highway type of attitude. And it is for that reason that I would prefer this lawsuit not be settled. I think it sets a really bad precedent for the city to have a business come in as a bully and try to strong arm us through these tactics. There seems to be a sense from the city council that this is a good compromise agreement to prevent the risk of losing 4 homes on Oxford. But I disagree. I don't feel that preserving those 2 homes is worth what we're giving up as far as precedent of the city being the one to decide what conforms with our long-term plans. And it was discussed at the zoning meetings. The master plan indicated to go 1 or 2 houses into the neighborhood, and that was part of the reason that zoning was not approved. And there's nothing, as Mr. Dean Smith pointed out at the last meeting in that agreement, that specifies the character of the homes that will be built. There's no reason to assume that you're going to end up with something that contributes to preserving the character of that neighborhood as it exists today. Also, on principle, I would prefer that Vincetta would be forced, if any agreement were made, to complete the Eaton parking lot first. They agreed repeatedly that they would do it, and they did not. And we are dealing with an organization where you give them an inch and they take a mile, and then you give them a mile and they take 2 miles, and it's just frustrating. Wish I had more synonyms, but I guess I'll stick with that one. But I mean, I think my feelings on this are well known, so the third point I want to make is I do want to point out a very specific issue with the consent judgment, even as it's rewritten. I'm sure that most of you have been more directly informed of closed-door meetings and other conversations that have taken place, but I really want to emphasize that I think it would be a serious mistake to trust any suggestions, hints, verbal representations of any kind from Vincetta Garage. If there is any language in this document that will allow them to get their way, they will leverage it in court at any opportunity to go against the spirit of the agreement, and that is a very big risk and part of the reason that I think settling is a bad idea. However, the specific problem that I have is in number 6, regarding the proposed Oxford site. On page 5, it reads, "The Planning Commission shall not have authority to require any modification that is inconsistent with the consent judgment or reduces the number of parking spaces below 26. And it seems innocuous. It's parallel with the language that's written for Eaton, but if you review the concept plan that we were shown last time, you'll see that on Oxford, unlike on Eaton, that wall is right up at the sidewalk, and there's absolutely no green buffer zone between the parking lot wall and the street. And I do not see a way mathematically that green buffer could be added without reducing the number of parking spaces below 26. So I feel like this is the wedge that they're going to use, to get their way, to build the least attractive parking lot possible with the least possible investment from them. And that is the specific clause that if you are going to choose to go forward with some type of agreement, I would like to see that addressed. But again, I honestly think it sets a bad precedent to allow a business to bully us this way, and I would like to see the litigation go forward to the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Sean Sweda, a resident of Berkley since 2003. I've been here quite a bit for this. Would it be possible for me to ask some questions to the city attorney? Some things I'm unclear about.
How about if you make your points, and then if there are ways that he
in
can
the
clarify,
previous
because
meeting-
I'm not going to.
Well, in the previous meeting, he said the reason why the agreement was written as it was as a variance was that the court had no ability to change zoning. Okay, so then on the Berkeley City website where you talk, you made the announcement for this meeting, and you stated, what the consequences would be if the case were lost, right? It was stated that one of the consequences could be that all 4 properties on Oxford could become parking. So I'm just wondering if he could explain what the mechanism would be by which that would occur when he had previously stated that the court couldn't change zoning.
Mr. Attorney?
I did not say that the court could not change the zoning. What I indicated is that the court can invalidate zoning. The court can approve a specific permitted use that it finds reasonable. What a court cannot do is actually determine the zoning. It can invalidate it.
Okay.
It can't determine it. The question came up in the context of why does the consent judgment read that the residential zoning will stay in place, but a parking use will be permitted? That's the reason why, because the court can approve a specific use. The court can't order the property rezoned. Only the council up here can
Right.
actually rezone property.
Okay, I was just asking. So what you're saying is if the case were lost, one of the outcomes could be that the court could rule on a use.
The court could invalidate the residential zoning on all 4 lots and can order that those lots may be used for parking.
Okay, so, but I mean, if they invalidated the zoning, then, I mean, effectively, it
Means it would be unzoned.
would be unzoned.
It would be unzoned until such time as the city put a zoning designation on it. Meanwhile, the court would be ordering that parking is a legal use.
Okay.
So that couldn't be changed.
Okay, so, and is this?
It's a legal
Sure. no,
technical thing, and I
this is just what I
realize it's
wanted
a
to
little
get clarification
hard to
on.
get your head around, but I've been
No,
doing it for 30 years, so to me, it seems,
well,
seems normal.
I thought I was saying what you were saying.
Right.
and
No, I
so-
understand it. It
So-
was a complicated
Sure.
concept.
So is this being litigated in the circuit court under 125-3606?
It's being litigated in the circuit court under a number of different legal theories, statutory and constitutional.
But is that operative? Is like, because what I was reading through the process, and what it seemed is that the way the process is supposed to work is that the zoning board of appeals makes a ruling, and then if you're an aggrieved party, then you're.
This is not an appeal from the zoning board of appeals. This is a circuit court challenge to invalidate the zoning based on statutory and constitutional reasons. This is not an appeal from the zoning board of appeals.
No, I never said it was an appeal. I said that if a party is aggrieved from the result of a zoning board of appeals, then it can challenge that under 125-3606.
That's correct.
Right.
But that doesn't apply
So
here.
that doesn't apply here. So that's not what's occurring here. This is a completely different legal
No,
process.
that would be an appeal from the zoning board of appeals to the circuit court.
All right,
This is a completely
All
different
right, I just wanted to find out. So it's just completely different. All right. Okay, well, that's helpful because I was looking at some other cases, and everything that seemed to come up was under this particular statute. So I was trying to figure out if that was what was applicable.
No.
Okay, good. So there's another statement on the website that says another consequence of losing would be there would be an award of money damages against the city.
Potentially.
Potentially, right. So I presume the city has liability insurance. Would it cover any payment for damages?
It might cover part. It depends on the amount and the nature of the damages. Ultimately, the city, when you talk about insurance, the city belongs to a self-insurance pool. Okay, it's not a commercial insurance company. Ultimately, whatever gets paid through this self-insurance pool comes back to the members in the form of increased rates based on our litigation history. Okay?
Right, but I mean, that's fundamentally no different than anybody else's insurance. I mean, your premiums
No, it is
could go
quite a
up.
bit different
Well,
because it's a
hold
much.
on, Mr. Stern, Mr. Sueda,
Sure.
I am not an attorney. I don't know how many people here are attorneys. I know Mr. Stern is an attorney. Maybe you are, maybe you are not. I don't want to get into the debating legalities with our attorney. What is the?
I'm not debating
No, tell us
legality. I'm
what's
trying to find out what the
important so we can-
consequences
right.
are of losing. Right? I mean, there's a statement on the city's website that talks about consequences of losing. I'm trying to get some clarity on what that is, because, you know.
Right, so there could be, yes. What you've mentioned is
Right,
potentially true.
But my question, and I think it's germane, is that, you know, say the judgment is $1 million, right?
Okay.
But, you know, because of insurance, right, your liability, the city's liability, is substantially less than that, right? It's an important distinction to make when you're talking and you're telling everyone that one of the consequences is the award of damages, right? Because that makes it sound as if, you know, if a judge bangs a gavel and says, you know, the city owes X amount of dollars, it's a reasonable question to say, what is the city actually on the hook for should they lose?
Here's what I'll tell you personally. Whether there are damages, and whatever those damages are, real or potential, is not a factor in at least my decision, and I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but whether that's not a concern. If we have to pay damages, if that went and we lost, okay, but that's not why I would make a decision on this.
Well, then I ask you a question? If that's your position, why was that on the website? Because it makes it.
Well, it's a true statement.
Well,
It's a possibility, but I'm just telling you, in my opinion, that is not what's driving my decision.
But
positive or
would
negative.
you at least agree that reading that one could if you were a relatively, you know, uninformed person and you saw that, you could think that the city would be on the hook for a massive amount of damages, and that's something that the city is concerned about?
It is a reality. It is a potential reality.
But what you're assuring me is that
I'm only saying for myself.
Right, but you're assuring me
That is not-
that has no bearing
That
on
does
your
not have a
decision.
bearing on my decision. whether
Okay, well,
this is yes or
that's
no.
comforting to know.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank you.
So, I mean, really, the reason why I have one other question. The requirements for 26 and 28 spaces that are in the agreement, that language, is that language in the agreement by request of the city or by request of the plaintiff?
It's negotiated.
So, from your standpoint, it's mutually agreeable?
That's for the council to decide tonight.
Okay, well, I mean, from my standpoint, it's pretty clear that 26 and 28 spaces are in the agreement, you know, by request of the plaintiff, and it's in there for a reason, and everyone should think long and hard about what the reason is for those being in there, because
I can tell you what the reason is. They want to be guaranteed that in building a parking lot, they are going to have the number of spaces that they believe they need. That's the reason.
Sure, and we want to be guaranteed that the aesthetic from the parking lot is acceptable. And
that's
those two
why-
things will be in,
Right. And that's why it's going to be subjected to Planning Commission review and approval.
except that you cannot reduce beyond 26 and 28
That's
spaces.
correct, and that shouldn't be a problem. We already know that's doable.
Okay, and who did you consult to tell you that?
Our expert planning witness in the litigation.
Okay.
It's doable. It can be done in a way that meets all code requirements. But again, there's probably 100 different ways to design a parking lot, and that will be the heavy lifting that the Planning Commission does at the time of site plan approval.
Okay. Well, so again, just another thing is that on the statement that was on the website, it talked about the consequences of winning, right? So talked a little bit about the consequences of losing. Now talk about the consequences of winning. And the consequences of winning said that the properties would remain zone residential. And it also said that the abandoned homes and the substandard parking would also remain. So I guess I want to make 2 points about that. I mean, the first one is that everything, literally everything that is undesirable about the status quo is 100% under control of the plaintiff, right? So if anyone has an issue with the standard quo and wants to do something because the status quo is poor, you have to go back to the fact that the reason why the status quo is poor is because of a series of actions and decisions by the plaintiff. So you're essentially allowing the plaintiff to manufacture a poor status quo, which can then be leveraged for something else that the plaintiff wants, which, I mean, it just is amazing to me. But there's just 2 other things. There are some parts about the status quo that would change that are completely unmentioned. Right? The first one is that assuming that this goes through litigation, all the appeals and everything else are exhausted, there's a final verdict and the city wins, right? You will have exhausted the legal recourse of the plaintiff, right? Which means for any further negotiation with this plaintiff, making the litigation go away is no longer a bargaining chip, right? So you will have eliminated a large piece of the leverage that the plaintiff has in any negotiation by simply winning the case. So that is a positive change to the status quo, number one. And number two, as my wife said, the result of taking this litigation to its conclusion is that the city will have established that it will fight to defend its decisions about zoning, right? And this is critical because if you don't fight, if you don't take a fight and take a stand somewhere, then the message you're sending is that anyone with deep enough pockets, you know, zoning, variances, all these other things don't apply to them, right? If they inflict enough pain through the legal process, they'll get what they want, and that's a big problem, right? So I know a lot of people look at this and they'll say, okay, they want 4 houses, we're giving them 2, split the difference, that's a fair deal, right? So, I mean, split the difference sounds like it's fair, but it's only fair when 2 parties have started at a reasonable point, right? The starting point for Vincetta Garage, right, the plaintiff in this lawsuit, was already having 2 property, or, you know, 1010, which got turned into a lot, 1046, getting 1046 and 1036 in conjunction with Lugo zone for parking, right? So that's 3 properties already on Eaton, and then another 4, right? Another 4, right? And they went through the Planning Commission, City Council meeting, Zoning Board of Appeals, and they were met with an overwhelming denial, right? No, right? Which tells you that their position, their starting position, was not reasonable. So splitting the difference between unreasonable and whatever it is not a fair deal. If you were to negotiate your salary and your prospective employer says, well, my starting offer is 0, right? Is it reasonable to split the difference? No, it's not. So I mean, I can tell.
Yeah, I
can tell you're getting impatient.
It's not. Your points make a lot of sense. They all do. I mean, they're all very valid points. I chuckled because, no, who's going to go in and negotiate like that? But what I will tell you is, and it's impossible for either of us to switch places and to find the other person's experience. My experience going through this process, you characterize it as, like almost that the city's giving up and rolling over and these sort of things. And I can tell you that that's not the case. It never was the case, but you can't see the other side necessarily. And what I mean is, many times, like, cities get sued all the time. Most of the time, they end right there. They settle right away, and they don't even go through the process. We were not going to do that. We wanted to fight this part of this process because, again, we felt that there was a clear need for a resolution, and we wanted to protect the neighborhood. So I'm not trying to say anything that your points were not valid. They're certainly valid, but in your perspective is a little different than what we've talked about, is all I'm trying to communicate to you.
That's fine. I just want you to understand, every single time I've come to you and I've talked to you about this issue, I always come from the standpoint of arguing it from a public policy standpoint. I'm not saying that it's bad for me, right? I'm not saying that, you know, it sucks for me, right? I'm saying that I think that this is a long series of bad public policy decisions, and I'm not saying that, you know, casting blame. I'm not saying let's cast a vote on creating a time machine and going back and, you know, making different decisions. I'm just saying I think, you know, settling here is bad public policy. I'm listing the reasons why. I'm not trying to tell you that I think that you're giving up. I'm just saying I think what you've heard is that the neighborhood is telling you overwhelmingly, we would rather see you fight, and we would rather lose that fight and potentially have to deal with all this all over again with, you know, 4 properties on Oxford, right? But going through the planning commission and going through all the other processes, totally unfettered by some agreement that is literally tying our hands in terms of the number of spaces. We would rather see you fight and lose than settle for this deal, right? And that's really all I wanted to tell you. And I hope that you hear me and you hear the words I'm saying, because I'm not here to criticize or anything else. I'm saying that, you know, if I was a member of this government, I would be advocating for exactly the same thing. I just think it's bad public policy to settle this case. I think that there's much more upside to litigate and win or lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
My name is Marty Pren, and I'm a resident of East Point, Michigan. And you might be wondering what I'm doing here. I'm a national elder advocate, and back in 2014, I had seen a story, I think it was by Channel 2, with Erica Erickson, and she was talking to one of the neighbors. His name was Jack, and he was 88 at the time, and he's still alive. And you'll have to excuse me, I didn't have time to get a fireworks permit, but there's going to be some fireworks going off here. I don't know which of you were on the board back in 2014 when I came and spoke, but I dealt with this type issue up in Houghton Lake in regards to deed restrictions. And I don't know that many people on city councils understand the value of deed restrictions, and there is one in the Lockmore Boulevard subdivision, that those lots that are west of where the Vincetta Garage is are deed restricted to single-family use only. It doesn't just say they were single-family use, it described how far the house had to be set back from the sidewalk, the side lots, and the level and the type of material that was used. And these deed restrictions are private contractual agreements with the original developer that platted this subdivision back in 1920-something. And I forget his name offhand, but it's a part of the record. And that is a private contractual agreement between the developer and any property owners that purchase property in those subdivisions in perpetuity. That means if the house was sold, that deed restriction follows the and is on the title of the home. Back in 1973, they stopped giving abstracts and the deed restrictions. You had to look them up yourself, but it was still the obligation of Kurt Catello to find out if there was deed restrictions. And he didn't do that. So now he wants to play Monty Hall and let's make a deal, and buys the houses and then tries to force the city into saying, you have to work with me because I need new parking. And that's not how it works. And I speak up on behalf of veterans, on behalf of the elderly people here. And because I don't live in Berkley, I'm not subject to retaliation from anybody. But I will let you know this, that I did contact both the FBI and the Justice Department today because I find it very unusual that previous to these other hearings, the votes were 6-0 against this type of development, and that a parking lot is not by definition a single-family use. And I just have to wonder what changed, and it's not for me to decide. And I just find it interesting that a lot of times individuals like Mr. Catello will make significant contributions to somebody's campaign contribution, and we don't say it's in exchange for a yes vote, but this is what needs to be investigated and be looked into, because these are deed restrictions that even the court can't change. If it's a private contractual agreement between the developer and the property owners, even the court can't change those. And city planners want to say, oh, it's not our job to enforce them. It's not your job to enforce them, but it's your job to understand that they're there, and you can't do something that is contrary to what that private contractual agreement is.
So I just want to be clear.
Sure.
Let me go back a second. Are you making accusations right now and saying that people have taken money from?
I'm not saying that.
Well, that's what you're implying.
No, no. Matthew Schneider, the U.S. Attorney for the state of Michigan, for the Eastern District, has said that Michigan is one of the most corrupt states when it comes to activities either with city councils, and we've seen it over in Macomb County with the trash contracts.
All right, well, I'm going to stop you there. That is, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, have you read the specific deed restrictions for the 2 properties in question?
It's not the 2 properties. The
No,
deed restrictions run for every lot in that subdivision.
That is incorrect. My question is, have you read the deed restrictions for the 2 properties in question?
Yes. And I have copies of those, and I've sent them to the Attorney General's office.
Well, then your copies must be different than mine, because they do not restrict it only to single-family housing. It allows parking lots on both.
No, it does
gives
not.
restrictions on what you can do if there are parking lots, but or if there are homes built, or a business in one case. One case it is specific that a business can be built. The 2 are different, but parking lots most definitely can be built on those. I was not on part of this council, but I do not appreciate your blunt accusations of corruption.
Yeah, you can do all the investigating.
Well, it's not my job to investigate.
That's fine, okay.
I've asked the FBI and the Justice Department and the Attorney General's office
Thank you.
to look into it. Thank you.
They can certainly look into that, and the deed restrictions is something that we have certainly been aware of and have been privy to. And I, again, am not an attorney. I speak to the attorneys that we have.
Ignored them.
That's your opinion, and we'll let you have your opinion. You've had many other opinions today.
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Other folks, please.
Kurt Height, Berkley. I just wanted to thank you guys for your commitment for trying to come to resolve on this. And, you know, I appreciate that you guys have gone to bat for the residents so long on this by the multiple voting of no that eventually led this to becoming a court case. But just so you know, the majority of the citizens, or at least from what I've talked to, and there was even a poll done today, a brief poll, 170 to 10 voted in favor of resolving this favorably and coming, agreeing to the agreement that's before the council. And so I think overwhelmingly a lot of people just want to get past this. And I know you guys are put in a hard position, because on one hand you got some residents that live over in that area. They don't want people parking on the street, but they also don't want the parking lot. So it's almost like you're putting in an impossible position to find a resolution, because they're not going to be happy with whatever happens. And obviously it's got to come to an end. So, thank you very much. And you guys' work is very much appreciated.
Thank you, Kurt. All right. Oh, Mr. Courtney?
Since Berkeley is going to go green, they put a lot of time and effort into sidewalks and bike lanes and so forth to go green, reduce the greenhouse and gases and effects, to be healthy, promoting bicycling and walking, rather than build the parking lot, let their patrons and that ride their bikes and walk. They got a bike rack there. Let them walk. Let them ride a bike. Save on all of that gas, which is what I believe it's in the master plan, what they're working towards is walking and biking. You put bike lanes all down Coolidge and through all the residentials. They don't need the parking lot. Let them walk, ride their bike. All that good food that they're getting, hey, work it off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joel Woznicki, 1089 Oxford. I was debating whether or not to speak, but kind of decided to do it. I'd like to say thank you, first of all. Thank you for your time, for listening to us speak and putting in all the time and effort to help resolve this. But I do have to ask, and I really want you to consider, why settle? Who really wants this? As you can hear from all our voices tonight, we don't want this. Vincetta does, but the neighbors do not. If money isn't an issue, if we think we have a strong case, and if damages aren't really a concern, why do we need to settle? We would rather take the risk of having us lose than to go through with the settlement and put a parking lot on Oxford. The houses are vacant because of Vincetta. There's a parking problem because of Vincetta. They've been a bad neighbor and they haven't acted in good faith. And so why do we have reason to trust them and settle and accept that they'll go forward with this? The agreement itself is not enough to ensure that they'll act in good faith. It doesn't use explicit language to guarantee the homes fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. There's no guarantee the wall is high enough to prevent light pollution. There's no guarantee that landscaping or wall material will improve the look or aesthetic of the neighborhood. A minimum of lots means that landscaping may be sacrificed to fit the number of spaces and limit the role of the commission. It guarantees almost nothing to protect the neighborhood and almost raises more questions than it answers. Why not mandate that Eaton is fixed before allowing Vincetta to build on Oxford? Why not show that they'll act in good faith on Eaton before allowing Oxford to happen? I just really ask that you consider our perspective, question whether or not this is the right decision. I ask that you really listen to us and see that the neighborhood needs to be protected. I ask that you do vote no on this agreement. But again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your service and for really being here for the residents. But please do listen to us and understand that we don't want this. But thank you again.
Thank you, Joe.
My name is Tammy Polk. I live on Eaton. If they put in this little parking lot, what guarantee does the residents have it's going to clean up that mess so people can have guests on Eaton?
What,
None.
the mess? You mean the parking?
Yeah.
Or the mess
yeah,
that were
the
referred to
parking
earlier?
on Eaton. People can't even have company because they have, people are parking to go get a hamburger.
Right, not in the parking, on the streets.
Yeah, and
Right.
if they put in this parking lot, then what guarantee does the residents have that that mess will be cleaned up? None. Right?
Thank you, Tammy. Council, at this point, any comments? We've again heard from residents have very valid, real concerns about a proposed consent judgment and the collaborative agreement essentially as a part of that. Are there any comments before we ultimately take action? Councilmember Henry?
Yeah, so I fully believe this agreement's in the best interest of absolutely everybody. If you removed any consideration of the lawsuit, I still believing it's sound zoning and planning here. It's fully consistent with rezoning that's already happened in the immediate areas. And despite whatever's Vincetta Garage has done in the past, there is a serious parking problem right now, and we've heard that testimony tonight, and I really do feel this is the best solution that's available. However, I also do hear clearly the neighbors' fears that the city won't stand up for them and be strong and enforce this. And I share that same concern. I want to be, again, crystal clear to staff, and I don't know how I can be more clear. We have an ongoing enforcement problem. Even this week, we have a planned unit development breaking their contract with the city again. It's been going on for years, and we keep giving them chance after chance, and we need to get tough on repeat offenders, or we're going to continue to have the situation we have tonight where the residents don't believe us that we're looking out for them and going to protect them. So we need to move forward with the settlement, but we also need to start demonstrating today, before we have to do anything on this one, that we're tough on enforcement to everyone.
Anybody else? Comments? I don't see anybody rushing to speak. No. Okay. Before council makes a decision, is there anybody else? I want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity.
Gary Polk, I live on Eaton Street. My question is, how will customers of Vincetta Garage know about this potential lot if it's built? Will they put up any type of sign or anything? Because most people would not bother to turn all the way onto Oxford Street just to find parking, particularly in inclement weather. Also, just to clarify what my wife said, it will still be closer for most people, and I apologize, I meant to walk this off to get you the exact mileage, but I've had some family issues over the last couple weeks. It's still, logically, it still would be closer for somebody to park on Eaton Street, practically to Fulford, than to walk the distance to these new lots. That's a question I'd like to see dealt with. I understand the council's position. I have full confidence that whatever decision, whether I agree or disagree with that, council will make this decision with all integrity and that there's no type of other issues. And I understand that there's really not a good solution that will help the people on both Eaton and Oxford Street. I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, we have two items there, essentially, as we mentioned, connected. The motion to reinstate the collaborative agreement, followed by the motion on the consent judgment. We will call separately for those roles, but there's not going to be a need for discussion in between, because is it fair? I mean, are we all on the same page? We've discussed them already. Before I do call for that, Gary just said, a great point, and mentioned before, that there's not a solution that's going to be ideal for anybody. I understand that. And we've understood that from the beginning. Part of the conversation and how we got to the point we're at now, I firmly believe that we can, with this agreement, resolve the parking issue, real or perceived, and I've heard both ways. But I think there is a way, certainly a way, that we can preserve the character of the neighborhood. I met with one resident that I spoke with a number of times used the term, or practically a park. That's what would be ideal in this resident scenario who is on Oxford close, would be if I looked out and I saw trees and didn't just see the parking lot and the cars. And it was brought up earlier, I think it may have been Gabrielle or Sean, I apologize, I'm not sure which of you mentioned it, but the ability to not make it look like it's just a parking lot. And I have full confidence in our planning commission's ability to do that within our ordinances. But if there are trees, and you look across the street at Westbourne, because that was pointed out as well, where there is a setback and there are some trees that make it look more of a part of a neighborhood. Westbourne's similar situation. We know where it is. It's encroaching on Oxford. There is a way that can happen and preserve the integrity of the neighborhood and get a couple of new homes and solve the practical issue that we hear about. Whether it's from folks who maybe live directly on Eaton or Oxford or elsewhere in the city, we hear about it. So that is something that we have to take into consideration as we have been negotiating this agreement to get to the point that it is. If we can do this practically a park, which I think I've asked our attorney, there is nothing in here that stops them from having to go right up to the sidewalk. We can push. If there's a setback with trees, other green features, to block not only lights turning around, but also to preserve the character next to those new houses that are going to be built. I do think that that is a practical resolution to this matter. And you can disagree with me, and that is okay. You can stand up and shake your head. It's not, Gary.
Can I just ask one question? Would this be just for the Axford Street, or would this be for Eaton also?
Well, so it would be, but Eaton has the apartment across the street from them.
Yes,
I
they
really
do.
want to make sure that it would be for both, but yes, but I want to make sure that the folks on Oxford who are going to be across from this don't have to just look at a parking lot, but yes. And I forgot where I was going at that point. At any rate, I do believe that that is possible. And it is a practical solution to something that has been going on for a long time. And this is not something that we have taken lightly, obviously. It's something we've discussed many times. And the last thing I'll say is, characterizing or making it look at least that the city is rolling over and maybe we should just fight it, because we do have a good strong case. I think it's an incredibly defensible case, and I do think that we would win. I think we have a very good shot at winning, I will say that. But that doesn't solve the problems, and it doesn't stop them from appealing, and it doesn't stop this process from continuing to go on and not having a resolution. Is it perfect? No. Does it solve our problems and should protect the integrity of our neighborhood? In my opinion, yes, it does. And with that, Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll on M0620?
Hennan,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gavin,
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. Ms. Mitchell, would you please call item number 3 on our agenda?
Motion number M720, matter of consideration of approving a proposed consent judgment to settle and resolve pending litigation, namely 27799 Woodward LLC versus City of Berkeley, Oakland County Circuit Court, case number 2017-159355-CZ.
Is there a motion to approve M0720?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hennan, support for Councilmember Blanchard. We already discussed. Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the roll on M0720?
Price,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gavin,
Yes.
Hennan,
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. Ms. Mitchell, would you please call the next item on our agenda?
Adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Dean with support from Councilmember Baker. Would you please call the roll?
Baker,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gavin,
Yes.
Hennan,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Turbrack.
Yes. The special council meeting of January 23rd is adjourned.